Let's forget the textbook theory for a minute. What we're diving into today is a story from the front lines, a real medical practice that was just one wrong click away from losing absolutely everything in a ransomware attack. We're going to walk through the 10 lessons they learned the hard way, so you don't have to.
Just let that sink in. It's a normal Tuesday morning. You've got your coffee, patients are on their way, but you can't get into your email. That's exactly how this whole nightmare kicked off. Not with some big, dramatic system crash, but with one single, quiet error message. It's a chillingly subtle start to a total catastrophe.
And believe me, the stakes here could not be higher. We're not just talking about a little inconvenience. The average cost for a data breach in the healthcare world has now soared past $11 million. And that number, it covers everything. The downtime, the lost business, the lawyers, the fines. It is a practice-ending figure.
So how in the world does a regular day spiral into a multi-million-dollar crisis? Let's go back and walk through those first few minutes of the attack, exactly as it happened.
Okay, so right after that locked inbox, things escalated fast. A medical assistant sees a literal skull and crossbones icon pop up on her screen. At the exact same time, all the shared drives, the digital lifeblood of the entire practice, they just start renaming themselves into complete gibberish. And get this is all going down while the waiting room is full and patients are in the exam rooms. The panic was real and it was instant.
So the big question is, how did they even get in? Well, it wasn't some super sophisticated genius-level hack. No, it came down to two simple and honestly painfully common mistakes that basically just left the front door wide open.
And that first vulnerability, it actually has a name. It's called shadow IT. This is what happens when your team, usually with the best of intentions, right, starts using unapproved software or their own personal accounts to get work done. They're just trying to be more efficient, but what they're really doing is creating these massive security holes that you can't even see.
And in this case, the attacker's way in was a receptionist's personal Gmail account. All she did was forward a patient summary from her work email to her personal one, just so she could finish it up from home. Weeks later, she clicked on a phishing link in that same personal inbox, and that was it. The bad guys were in. It was that simple. The second mistake was all about a piece of old, forgotten tech. See, the practice had multi-factor authentication, that extra security code you get on your phone, on all their main systems. But it was completely missing on an old VPN that was set up ages ago for some billing process that was barely used anymore. So where do you think the attackers hammered away? The logs showed they tried thousands and thousands of logins at that one single unprotected door.
So, once an attacker gets past those first lines of defense, what do they find? Well, more often than not, it's a complete treasure trove of poorly organized data just sitting there, waiting to be stolen.
Now, this is where it gets really terrifying. Deep inside their network, the investigators found this shared cloud folder, and it was literally labeled "Old Charts Do Not Delete." Inside were thousands of old, scanned patient records. And because it was a synced cloud folder, it was sitting on multiple laptops, including one that belonged to a doctor who left the practice years ago. It was a concentrated, forgotten, totally unsecured goldmine for an attacker.
This kind of data mess often starts with simple confusion. Like, when should your staff use encrypted email versus the patient portal? If you don't have crystal clear rules, people just invent their own risky workarounds. A clear policy here is absolutely key. As you can see, portals are way better for any kind of ongoing conversation where you need a solid audit trail. Encrypted email, that's better for specific one-off messages. That kind of clarity is what stops people from making really dangerous choices.
And the risk doesn't just stop with your own team. A breach at your third-party billing service or your cloud backup provider, that's still your breach. If they're the ones who expose your patient data, it's your practice's name on the news, and you're the one on the hook, both legally and with your reputation.
Okay, so the attack is happening. Now we have to pivot to the response. What do you actually do in those first few critical hours? It's all about damage control, recovery, and making some incredibly tough calls under insane pressure.
Look, a backup you've never actually tried to restore from isn't a plan, it's just a wish. A real strategy is crucial. First, your backups have to be off-site and immutable, which is just a fancy way of saying the ransomware can't mess with them. Second, you have to really know, how many hours of downtime your practice can actually survive. And third, you absolutely have to test your restore process at least once a year. No excuses. In the chaos right after an attack, this is the one question everyone is going to ask you. What data did they access?
Which files did they steal? And if you don't have good centralized logs from all your systems, your email, your VPN, everything, you simply can't answer that question. And here's the kicker. If you can't prove what wasn't stolen, you have to assume the worst and report it that way.
So having cyber insurance is non-negotiable, but what does it really cost? This table gives you a rough idea. As you can tell, getting enough coverage to handle a multi-million-dollar incident is not cheap. It is a serious investment, but it's one you have to weigh against the very real possibility of total financial ruin.
And please listen to this, because it might be the most important lesson about your insurance policy. It is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. If you don't have the basic security controls in place, like that multi-factor authentication we keep talking about, your insurance company can and very likely will deny your claim. They absolutely expect you to do the basics.
All right, we've just dissected a complete disaster. So now let's turn all of these painful lessons into something you can actually use. A simple one-page action plan to protect your own practice.
The best way to organize this is with a simple people, process, technology framework. For people, we're talking about things like running regular phishing drills and getting everyone to take a firm pledge. No patient info in personal email ever. For process, it's about formalizing how you look at risk, especially with your vendors. And for technology, it's those non-negotiables we've been hitting on. MFA on everything, backups that are encrypted and tested, and centralized logs.
So, here's what it all boils down to. Preparation is everything. The practice in our story, they survived. But being truly ready isn't about luck. It's about having a plan written down on a simple checklist that you have actually practiced before the crisis hits and the sirens start.
And this brings us to the final and most critical question you need to go back and ask your team. Looking at your practice right now, are you just hoping for the best, kind of relying on luck? Or have you actually done the work to be ready for that inevitable Tuesday morning phone call?
Your next step is simple. Don't wait for a crisis to force your hand. Start building your own one-page checklist today. Turn these lessons into your plan. Be ready.